Have you ever stopped to think about how much of your anguish comes from your obsession with control? No, I'm not just talking about external control, work, bills, routine, but internal control. The suffocating need for certainties, to know what will happen tomorrow, to perfectly understand who you are, what you want, where you're going. Society has taught you to seek definitive answers, as if life were a mathematical equation. But the truth that few have the courage to face, is that this obsession with certainty distances you from what you desire most: peace. Perhaps you are tired, exhausted from trying to predict the unpredictable, from crafting perfect plans that crumble at the slightest breath of chance. Maybe you are living in the limbo of anxiety, where every uncertainty becomes a threat, where the unknown seems like an enemy to be defeated. But what if the problem isn't the uncertainty? What if the real poison is your refusal to accept it? Michel de Montaigne, a French thinker from the 16th century, understood this before any of us. While the world around him sought dogmas, absolute truths, closed systems, he did something rare. He looked inward. He observed his own mind, his fears, his inconsistencies, and dared to write about all of it with brutal honesty. Not as someone who has the answers, but as someone who learned to live better with the questions. And that's what you need now. No more certainties, but a new relationship with what cannot be controlled. In this video, I want to propose a different path, a lighter and much braver way to face life. I want to show you, through Montaigne's wisdom, that when you stop resisting the unknown, something changes. Anxiety loses its grip, pressures diminish, and for the first time in a long time, life begins to seem simpler. But be careful. This simplicity doesn't come from the outside. It's not a change in the world. It's an internal revolution. And it starts now, when you decide to let go, to abandon the illusion of control, and to walk with me, not towards answers, but towards a new way of being in the world. Are you ready? Because this journey, unlike anything you've been taught, begins with a single phrase: I don't know, and that's okay. Montaigne was not an ordinary philosopher. He did not ascend to pulpits, create complex systems, or try to force the world into rational formulas. He wrote from within his own skin. Sitting in his library, surrounded by books and silence, Michel de Montaigne decided to investigate the most unstable and mysterious object that exists: himself. His texts are not treatises, they are mirrors. He did not write to convince you, but to invite you, to think, to doubt, to question, to look within yourself without fear, or rather, despite the fear. Unlike other thinkers who sought universal truths, Montaigne embraced the opposite: he did not know. And the more he lived, the more he realized that knowing little about the world, and even less about himself, was not a flaw. It was a rare wisdom. Que sais-je? He constantly asked. What do I know? Not as a provocation, but as a starting point, because admitting ignorance for him was not an intellectual failure. It was a liberation. It was stopping the pretense, stopping the maintenance of masks. It was lifting the burden of having to be someone right, complete, impenetrable. The modern world rejects this humility. We live in a time when one must have an opinion about everything, a stance on everything, certainties as sharp as blades. But Montaigne offers us the opposite, the chance to be human before being ideological. He believed that our fragility, our doubts, our contradictions are not weaknesses to be corrected, but essential parts of what makes us truly alive. And perhaps that is exactly what you need to hear right now, that you no longer need to uphold false certainties to be worthy, that you don't need to know everything to move forward, that it's okay to be incomplete. Montaigne allowed himself to change his mind. He contradicted himself. He admitted that what he thought yesterday might not hold true today. He understood the natural movement of the human mind, which molds, adapts, and transforms, and instead of fighting against it, he embraced it with kindness, with irony, with astonishment. He knew that living is not about dominating the world with solid ideas, but about navigating it with an open mind and an attentive heart. And that is why Montaigne is so necessary today. In a time when everyone shouts, he whispers. In a time of hard certainties, he teaches the lightness of doubt. And if you are feeling lost, crushed by the demands of being someone stable, defined, unchangeable, perhaps what you lack is not direction, but freedom. The freedom to change, to not know, to simply be. But Montaigne does not just invite us to doubt. He warns us about the price of fleeing from it. Because the more we try to control life, the more suffering we generate. And that is exactly what we are going to talk about now. The silent suffering that arises from the desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You try to control everything, don't you, tomorrow? Other people's reactions, your career, your body, your feelings, even what doesn't depend on you. And the more you try to hold the reins of life, the more it slips away. It's like trying to grasp water with your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it flows away. Have you noticed how much this costs you? This obsession with control is not just exhausting, it's toxic. It turns you into a prisoner of unrealistic expectations, a permanent inspector of everything that could go wrong. And this has a name: anxiety. Anxiety at its core is the fear of the unpredictable. It's the desperation for guarantees in a world that offers none. Most people live in this constant state of alert, trying to anticipate every curve in the road as if that could prevent the accidents of the soul. But Montaigne knew something that modern psychology only confirmed centuries later. Living in an attempt to predict the future is to live in a state of war with reality. You see, human suffering doesn't come only from what happens to us. Often it comes from our futile struggle against what happens. It's the desire for life to be different from what it is. It's the denial of the natural flow of things. Montaigne wrote about this with an almost disconcerting frankness. He accepted his pains, his losses, his uncertainties, not as something to be eliminated, but as an integral part of existence. And by doing so, he freed himself from the burden of resisting everything. Have you noticed how the most controlling people are also the most tense, the most exhausted, the most inflexible? They don't relax because they believe that if they're not always in control, something bad will happen. But this belief doesn't protect, it imprisons. Montaigne, on the contrary, proposed a conscious surrender, not a cowardly resignation, but a courageous acceptance that the world is not your slave and that your mind needs to learn to flow, not to dominate. And here lies the cruel irony. The more you try to control, the more frustrated you become. And the more frustrated you are, the more you think you need control. It's a vicious cycle that swallows you whole. And what do you gain in the end? Vicious cycle that swallows you whole. And what do you gain in the end? A tense body, an exhausted mind, and a soul without peace. Montaigne shows us another way. Living well is not about controlling everything. It's about knowing how to coexist with what cannot be controlled. But how do you do that in practice? How do you learn to live with the unpredictable without losing yourself in it? The answer lies in Montaigne's own attitude toward life, the constant practice of self-reflection, not as a way to analyze oneself coldly, but as a ritual of deep inner listening. While the world cried out for certainties, Montaigne withdrew into silence to observe what was within him, and what he found was not immediate clarity, but a whirlwind. Contradictions, fears, confused desires, inexplicable impulses, all those things that most prefer to hide or ignore, he chose to confront head-on, but not as one who judges, as one who listens. Montaigne's great genius was not in creating theories about the human mind, it was in having the courage to become a living experiment of the human condition. He transformed himself into a field of study, and his writing became a mirror. In his essays, he does not write as one who teaches, but as one who shares a process. He thinks out loud and invites the reader to do the same. He did not want to shape minds. He wanted to free them. By narrating his own doubts, his most intimate impulses, his changes of opinion, and even his moments of weakness, Montaigne shows us something revolutionary. You do not need to be right all the time. You just need to be present with yourself. This practice of constant self-observation, without filter and without mask, is one of the deepest forms of self-knowledge that exists. But be careful, observing yourself is not about torturing yourself with criticism. It is about learning to look inward with honesty and compassion. It is about realizing when you are trying to deceive yourself, when you are pretending to know what you do not know, when you are forcing yourself to maintain an image that no longer represents you. Montaigne wrote to free himself from these shackles. He said, "I am human, and nothing human is alien to me." In other words, everything that resides in you. And do you know what is the most powerful aspect of this practice? It dissolves shame. When you begin to observe yourself with sincerity, you realize that much of your suffering comes from the attempt to be something idealized, from following an unrealistic model of emotional, intellectual, or moral perfection. Montaigne reminds us that we are not marble statues, we are mutable, flawed beings and beautifully imperfect. The simplicity we seek begins when we stop fighting against our own nature. And here comes a powerful key. This acceptance is not passivity. On the contrary, it is the first step toward any real transformation. Because only those who see themselves clearly can change authentically. Only those who embrace their shadow can walk toward the light. But there is another essential layer to this journey, because even if you start to observe yourself, you still need to deal with something inevitable: change. Nothing in you, in others, or in the world remains fixed. And as long as we do not understand this truth and do not learn to live with it, we will continue to suffer. This is what we will talk about now. We'll continue to suffer. This is what we will talk about now. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It breaks down Jung's core ideas and gives you tools to understand yourself more deeply. Link is in the pinned comment. Most people live as if life should be a straight line, as if one day, by acquiring certain knowledge, stability, or success, everything would finally fall into place, as if there were a destination where everything would stop changing, where feelings would stabilize, where doubts would disappear, and things would make sense. But this fantasy, sold by religions, schools, gurus, and even corporate culture, is precisely what distances us from reality and from peace. Montaigne saw this with rare clarity. He knew that everything in life pulses in flow. Our thoughts change, our bodies age, people come and go, our desires transform, our bodies age, people come and go, our desires transform, our certainties dissolve. Nothing is fixed, nothing is guaranteed, nothing is definitive. And trying to live as if it were, as if life should be predictable, unchanging, controllable, is to prepare the ground for frustration, suffering, and emotional collapse. Change is not an accident, it is the essence of existence. And the more we resist it, the more rigid, bitter, and disconnected from the present we become. Montaigne accepted his changes as part of his humanity. He knew that being inconsistent at times was a sign of growth, that changing one's mind was a sign of courage, that letting go of an old thought, even for another equally uncertain one, was a step toward clarity. Constancy is a virtue of mechanical minds, he provocatively stated. For him, living well was not about clinging to a fixed identity, but about dancing with impermanence. Have you noticed how most of your fears are linked to the possibility of change? Fear of losing someone, fear of losing a job, fear of things changing. 1. Fear of losing a job, fear of things changing. But what if instead of resisting, you began to embrace these transformations as part of the natural process of life? As Montaigne did, what if you stopped viewing each transition as a failure and started seeing it as evolution? Accepting change is not about conforming. It is about stopping the fight against the flow of reality. It is learning to ride the wave instead of trying to dam the sea. The lightness that so many seek does not come from forced stability, but from inner flexibility, from the ability to let go, to adapt, to be reborn. Montaigne understood this before his time, and perhaps you are beginning to understand it now. But recognizing change as natural does not solve everything. It is necessary to know how to deal with this instability from within, how to sustain one's existence amid doubt, chaos, and the unknown without going mad. This is where philosophy meets practice, and where Montaigne offers us a path, the construction of mental habits, of internal rituals that help us live better with uncertainty. Philosophy is of no use if it doesn't touch real life. Montaigne knew this. His texts are not abstract musings. They are existential tools. He didn't write to impress intellectuals, but to understand how to deal with the fear of death, with sadness, with insecurity, with the aging body, with the faltering mind. And perhaps the greatest gift Montaigne left us was precisely this: the idea that thinking is an act of survival, that reflecting on one's own life is a way to learn to live it with more courage and less suffering. But how exactly does one live with uncertainty? It's not just a matter of accepting, it's a constant practice, a re-education of the mind, and this requires discipline. Not discipline in the rigid military sense, but in the sense of commitment to your own freedom. Because living well with uncertainty is a daily exercise, here are some Montaignian principles that can, truly, change the way you deal with life. First, question your certainties. Every time you feel 100% sure about something, stop, observe, reflect. Absolute certainty is often a disguise. For fear, a defense mechanism against the discomfort of not knowing. Montaigne did exactly that. He doubted even his own thoughts, not out of insecurity, but of wisdom. He knew that the most dangerous thought is the one that does not admit to being revised. Second, practice self-questioning as a ritual. Write. It doesn't matter if it's a diary, a letter that will never be sent, or a loose note. Putting your thoughts on paper is a powerful way to make visible what troubles you. Montaigne wrote hundreds of pages about himself, not out of vanity, but to understand himself, to organize internal chaos, to make his own mind habitable. Third, embrace impermanence as an organizing principle. Plan, yes, but know how to let go of the plan when life changes, because it will change. Flexibility is true strength. Instead of relying on fragile certainties, learn to move with ease, adapt, reconfigure, reinvent. Montaigne said that the wisest man is the one who knows how to change with the things that change. Cultivate humor in the face of your own fragility. Yes, laugh at yourself. Montaigne didn't take himself too seriously, and that's why he was so profound. He laughed at his own inconsistencies, mocked his fears, and ironized his vanity. Humor is a way not to be crushed by your own demands. It's a way of saying, I am human, and that's okay. Finally, reserve moments of silence. To with yourself, without distraction. No phone, no stimulation, just presence. Solitude was Montaigne's greatest ally, not for isolation, but for clarity. It is in silence that you hear what you really think it is. In the pause that the mind reorganizes itself. And it is in that internal space that uncertainty ceases to be a threat and transforms into fertile ground for new possibilities. But all of this, as powerful as it is, only makes sense when you see the real value behind all this practice. Freedom. The freedom to be who you are without needing to have all the answers. The freedom to live lightly, even when nothing is certain. The freedom to belong to yourself. And it is precisely with this theme, the inner freedom that arises from the acceptance of doubt, that we will conclude this journey. Because Montaigne didn't just want you to survive chaos, he wanted you to dance with it. In the end, everything you tried so hard to control was, from the very beginning, uncontrollable. Life was not made to fit into your emotional spreadsheets, nor to obey your idealized calendar. People will disappoint you, plans will fail, feelings will change, and none of this is a mistake. It is simply the nature of things. Montaigne understood this with an almost uncomfortable clarity. He saw that suffering does not come from change itself, but from the resistance to it, from the refusal to accept that life is flow, not form. When you embrace uncertainty, something changes, not in the world outside, but within you. Rigidity begins to give way. Anxiety loses its meaning. You stop fighting against what is and start flowing with what presents itself. This is not resignation. It is wisdom. It is emotional maturity. It is freedom. The freedom to live without the burden of having to understand everything. To not need a label for every feeling, an explanation for every pain, a right path for every choice. Life does not demand perfection from you. It only asks for presence. The simplicity we seek so much is not outside. It is not in a life without problems, in an impeccable routine, or in a completely planned future. It is in the moment you allow yourself not to know. In the moment you say, with honesty and courage, I don't have all the answers. And that's okay, because it is in that space of humility that true peace is born. The peace that does not depend on circumstances. The peace that comes from within. Montaigne taught us that by accepting our ignorance, we become more human and more free. And if you've made it this far, if this message resonated within you, it's because there is a part of you ready to let go of the weight of control, ready to breathe more lightly, ready to live with more authenticity. So tell me, what in you still resists the unknown? What do you feel when you look to the future and see no clear answers? Comment below. Share how this reflection touched you. I read every comment attentively, and rest assured someone will recognize themselves